Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever part of the world you are tuned in from. This is Funny Like a Clown Podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Wirth. February 7th, 2020. As always, Funny Like a Clown Podcast is brought to you by G Vegas Buffalo Sauce. For the spicy, sweet, savory taste of game time, there is only one G Vegas. This is episode 50, and I promised you guys something special for this episode. So how about a trip back to your childhood? On the phone, I have actor, stand-up comedian, known for being on Make Me Laugh, Fernwood Tonight, Mork and Mindy, Growing Pains, and probably best known for his role of Graham Lubbock on the hit ABC television series Just the 10 of Us, Bill Kirchenbauer. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. That was a very nice intro.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show. This is a trip back to my childhood. I did watch the show, but what do you remember most about that time in your life that you were experiencing that success? Was it exciting, confusing, stressful, all of the above?
It's funny. I just got done dubbing a lot of the shows that I haven't watched for a long time. And they're on VHS, and I'm switching them over to digital. And so I've really watched the shows. I just really haven't seen them, but I just remember all the good times. I mean, it was fun. It's like a family. Not just the people in front of the cameras, but the people behind the cameras and all the hard work and the people that it was certainly one of the better times I've had in my life, and it paid well. And,
that counts.
I got a little celebrity-dom with it that has its ups and downs, but it was great. It's like a big, huge. It's the closest thing that I've ever had to. Well, I can't say that because I've had many jobs in my life, but this was a good job. It was the stage that we shot at was literally the closest stage to my house. I lived in North Hollywood, and we shot at the Warner Ranch, and the building, the stage, was the closest stage studio to my house in all of Los Angeles. So
that's convenient.
I got to get on my bike sometimes. I ride my bike to work and take a lunch and take naps in the afternoon. It was like going back to third grade again.
Sure. I mean, when you're around that people that many hours a week, it's hard not to form a bond with them. But
oh yeah, and everybody. People don't realize how many people there are that work on these shows. I mean, there's carpenters and painters and cameramen and costume people. There's a guy and his assistant, and all their job is called craft services. And you'll see it on movies. It's a fancy name for the guy that keeps food on the set. And they give him a budget, and he when you get there in the morning, there's toast and oatmeal, and
that's his job.
Maybe some scrambled eggs and all that kind of stuff. And then during the day, he keeps things out, and he doesn't feed you lunch and dinner or anything, but he just keeps you want to go over to the craft services and get a bagel or something. It's there.
Okay.
That's what he does. That's all he does. He goes shopping and comes back and makes food so people can have snacks.
Well, that leads me to my next question. I mean, some comics work for years just to taste a little bit of success, and others it seems to happen overnight for them. I mean, did you have a formula of success that made you stand out from the other comics at the time that you were able to get on hit television shows like that?
I just concentrated on doing good stand-up comedy. I'm a believer that if you have a passion in life and you follow it and you do what you like, things will come to you.
Good things will happen.
And that's always the best position when people come to you. And I'm talking about if you want to be someone that makes jewelry, or you want to be someone that gets on the radio, or you want to be someone that's a real estate agent, or whatever it is.
Right.
If you do it and you do it well, and you do it with respect towards you and the job, and take pride in your work, success will come to you. But I was lucky. But I was on some bad pilots.
It wasn't all success, right?
What?
It wasn't all success. There's some ups and some downs, right?
No. I mean, I've been fired off of a couple of sitcoms. I was on a show with Donna Pescow and Robert Hayes. I forget what it was called. Angie. It was called Angie.
Okay.
And it wasn't on all, maybe one season. It was Robert Hayes from Airplane, which I was also in, and Donna Pescow from Saturday Night Fever. And it was a sitcom about a guy, I forget what the actual situation was. But I got hired to play Robert's best friend. And I was on there, I think they'd already done one or two of them. But they hired me, and I was there almost a week. And I got a call from my agent after about 4 days or something. And he said, well, they called, they don't want you to come back on Monday. And I thought, well, there's a thing called pay or play, which means they're going to pay you anyway.
Right.
In fact, I think they hired me for about 3 or 4 episodes, and it was like a package deal, so I got paid. But, I was devastated. I thought, what? And I forget what the director's name was, but he did one of the nicer things I'd ever had anybody do. He called me at home, and he said, Bill, I want you to know there was nothing you did wrong. He said, you were too funny.
Well, that's nice of him. Okay. Well,
he said you were too funny, and the studio and the network, they just thought you were kind of stealing the stage.
Stealing the scene, right?
And I thought, well, good God, don't go tell that to Sean Hayes.
What am I supposed to do, right?
or Art Carney or some of these other people that, that's an asset if somebody can stand out in a sitcom. But they felt threatened, and that's their show. They do whatever they do. But I remember him telling me that because I really thought, oh, what did I do? What did I do?
Supposed to be not funny or what? Well, they say what? Don't ever get too high with the highs and don't ever get too low with the lows, right? If you're going to survive in this business.
Yeah. But that and then I had a dog pilot I did once called A Dog's Life, where I played a dog. And I did that for a while, for about the better part of a week. And Fred Silverman came in and watched a run-through. He just died recently. And, I don't know, he said, get rid of him.
That was it, huh?
Then they hired Dave Dell, and then he was there like 3 days, and they fired him. And then they got the guy that played Seinfeld's father. I forget what his name was. And he kept it, and then they never did pick up the show. Well, but it was a pilot. It's around somewhere.
But I do stand up, and I mean...
Things is bad things, and you do what you do.
Yeah, the headliner don't want you stealing the show. The headliner don't want you to be more funny than him.
Well, that's not... sometimes it happens, but smart headliners or stars of shows don't get that way. So, again, it's like Jackie Gleason. He knew that Art Carney was really funny, and he didn't get jealous because of that. There's stars of television and that don't like people showing them up, but it all comes back to it's still Jackie Gleason's show. I'm showing my age here, but
I remember.
It was like Taxi. I forget the guy's name that starred in that, but it wasn't. People didn't watch Taxi to watch him. They watched Taxi to watch Andy Kaufman and all the other people.
Judd Hirsch played Alex Rieger.
All the characters around. Same thing with the Bob Newhart show. He had his show. It's called the Bob Newhart Show, and he had all these characters, and people called. They watched to watch the characters.
Sure.
And that's why that's the success. And if you're smart, you go with that, and it's always still the Bob Newhart Show. So.
Know your place.
You got to share. It's an ensemble group.
All right. So, I mean, I was a fan of Just the 10 of Us as a kid, more because at my age I wanted to date all the girls that played your daughter. But
so did I.
There you go. But do you still stay in touch with any of the cast? Do you do any of the Comic-Cons or anything you get together?
There's a couple of them I see. It's like high school. You stay in touch with the people that want to stay in touch with you, and you want to stay in touch with them. It's been 30 years. The littlest girl, she was 8 or 10, I think. And so, she's an adult woman now with kids, so that was her childhood. She kind of remembers it.
Grew up on
it. That played my daughters. They're have their own families now and stuff, but I keep in contact with a couple of them. In fact, I just sent them some copies of the shows that I had that I digitalized, and neither one of them had full season. We did about 52 shows, I think, with the two-part transition.
That's a lot of work. 52 shows is a lot of work, right?
It is. And again, people think you do those. I've had people think, wow, does it take up a whole day to do that? No, it takes up a whole week.
Right. Don't realize how much work goes into it.
just shoot that stuff in one day. I mean, there's a whole process of everybody building the sets and practicing and what they do called blocking. There's a YouTube video on YouTube. If anybody wants to know how a sitcom is made, go to Bill Kirchenbauer channel, and I have spent a whole episode on my new YouTube channel explaining to people how a sitcom is made.
That's some interesting stuff, and then they realize how much work goes. And when you watch, you don't realize. When you're in one, then you finally think, wow, it takes this much.
It really does. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of people,
commitment,
editors, and everybody from all over the place. And I wanted to mention, since I'm doing your sitcom, that I also now have a sitcom of my own. What am I saying? Sitcom. Podcast.
Podcast. I was going to bring that up. So if some of the people want to tune in, what do you got?
It's called the Kirchenbauer Half an Hour, and it's got a little 2 on the end, so it's the Kirchenbauer Half an Hour to the Second Power.
Okay, how would they tune in if they wanted to find it?
They can go on Spotify, or they can go on Stitcher, and I think we just got ourselves on Apple today. But just search for it, and it shouldn't be hard to find. Again, it's Kirchenbauer, Kirchenbauer, and then Half an Hour, Haffenhauer.
And is it comedy, or what do you guys talk about?
And I am on there with my co-host thing, and we talk about all sorts of stuff. We don't talk about religion or politics, because I don't feel you can really change people's minds about that stuff.
Yeah, those are sensitive subjects, right? You talk about comedy, obviously, right?
Well, we talk about comedy, we talk about life. This is the first episode I talk about fame, because I feel that I had a taste of it, and I feel qualified to discuss it. And I answer a lot of questions on Quora about comedy and stuff, and I have people that go, how do I become famous? It seems to be in this day of social media and Instagram and stuff, a lot of people are obsessed with being famous, not necessarily for any apparent reason, but they just want to be famous. And I don't know. It seems like, 2-year-olds want to be famous. They want to grow up and be famous.
Right.
But you got to have a reason. You can be famous. You can be infamous. But fame is so the first episode I talk about fame,
right.
And then I think the second episode we just put out there to talk about manners. I talk about manners.
That's becoming a thing of the past, manners.
I tell a lot of stories, and we're just going to talk about different subjects. I've got many celebrity guests that I've of mine, friends that I know that will be doing some guest spots on the show, and we're also going to be talking to some of my Facebook friends and playing. It's really just kind of it's a half an hour.
Right.
That's all it is. It's just a half an hour. Everybody's got a half an hour, and that's the name of the theme song.
All right.
So I urge people to go on there and
listen to
half an hour.
Any of the Funny Like Clown podcast listeners to go over and check that out, because laughter is the best medicine, and I'm sure you'll keep them laughing over there. But you were an established stand-up comedian, as you said, before you get into the television thing. What gave you the itch to get started in comedy?
Well, I've always been funny.
Like the class clown?
As a kid, my dad was in the Army, and we moved around a lot, and I had to kind of assimilate to the newest situation, and I think I did that through humor. I did puppets when I was little, from about 5 years old. My grandmother gave me a couple of puppets, and I found them entertaining, and I moved on from puppets to marionettes, and then I had a Jerry Mahoney puppet that I did, which is very common, incidentally, among comedians, to either get started kind of in magic or puppets or something like that. And so I did puppets when I was in elementary school, and as I got older, then I started doing impressions. I would watch impressionists on TV, Rich Little and David Fry and guys like that, and Frank Gorshin.
Were those the guys that inspired you?
What now?
Were those the guys that inspired you?
Well, as far as the impressionists, yeah. I mean, I got pretty good at it, but I was about 16, and there's not much you can do when you're 16. You can't go get jobs in nightclubs. And
right.
As I got older, then I went to college and started getting into radio and television. And I worked on radio for a little while, and then I followed this girl out to California, decided I'd take mime classes. So I figured I studied mime, I might meet some girls, and I didn't meet too many girls, but I learned to mime, and then I studied improv, and then I started going up to comedy clubs and doing what I thought was funny, which was sound effects and inanimate objects and things like that. Pretty much my guru with comedy, even though we have two different styles, was George Carlin. I discovered George when I was in college, and
the Godfather.
And I magically got to actually at one point be friends with him. When I went out to California, I entered this contest called the Funniest Person in Los Angeles, or excuse me, the International Los Angeles Comedy Competition. And George was one of the judges.
How did you do?
I won, and
can't beat that.
Then I went on to do my first Tonight Show with George, and I did a couple of them with George. And you know, he was a very nice guy. He was a good friend, and he would give me advice sometimes. And he was just a real sweetheart. And I've seen him, saw his shows many times. He was very prolific. He always had an opinion. It was always smart, he was a real wordsmith, and he had something to say. And I just enjoyed George. I loved.
I've heard that about George from other comics, that he never forgot where he came from. That's good when you don't forget where you come from.
Yeah, and Johnny Carson was a big, even again. I mean, I grew up watching Johnny Carson. He was the stand-up comedian, and then he had on all these comedians that I watched over the years when I grew up. Robert Klein and.
If you got the wave from Johnny, you were a made comic, right? If you got the wave to come over, you were a made comic in that time, right?
Oh yeah. Well, just even if you did well on I just watched my first Tonight Show. Again, I'm digitalizing videotapes, and if I did, I would kill. You see, the first time, the rule was if you did the show with a guest host, if you did material, it really didn't count because Johnny wasn't there.
Right.
So you could do a whole set with a guest host, and it really didn't count. And then a month later, you come back and do it with Johnny and do the same set. And wow, Johnny got to see it. So sometimes you could get two shots out of one set.
Sure.
But as they used to say around the Comedy Store, you're only as good as your last show. I did the Carson on Wednesday. Oh, that's great! I saw it killed. When are you going to do it again? So it went on. I did 14 Tonight shows.
Wow.
So
that's impressive. Sure. Well,
it was. But I tell you, this guy, buddies of mine that have done twice that, and you wouldn't know them if I told you their name or I showed them to you. You go, who? But they're very funny guys, and they just did a lot of Tonight shows, but they weren't all that memorable, I guess, for some reason. I don't know.
It's luck. Maybe it's just that it comes down to luck. You either get lucky with it or you don't.
I don't know. I don't know. But you always have to go back, and you'd have to show the material to the talent coordinator, and he'd make his little comments. And normally they weren't anything that really I paid attention to, because he really didn't know what the hell he was talking about. They did this thing I call it in Hollywood. I call it pissing in the pond.
Right.
In that you come up with something, and he'll come by and go, oh, maybe you should say green instead of blue.
There's a lot of rules.
Okay. Yeah, that'll make a big difference in the joke. yeah, say green. Don't say blue. Oh, okay. So they want to say, see, I helped them with that bit.
Of course, they want to be a part of it, right? But you took a little bit of time off.
That's the kind of stuff that guy used to say. But I would go on there, and then I hosted a talk show. Let's see, it was on ABC. It was what's his name? The big LA comedian. I forgot. Not the comedian, the radio guy, Rick Dees. Rick Dees had a talk show on ABC for about 2 weeks,
right?
And they got rid of him, and then they started looking for other people to host the show. I did it for a week. Hosting a talk show is rough because it really exposes you for who you are.
Yeah, same thing as a podcast.
You don't have a script. You don't have a script, and it exposes how smart you are, how articulate you are, how you handle things.
Right.
And it's a real, people like Chevy Chase tried to do it, and people got to see what Chevy Chase was really like, and it doesn't last all that long. Let's see. Magic Johnson tried to do it.
Yeah, it's an art form for sure. Everybody tried to be Johnny, but there's only one Johnny.
Yeah, it's a hard thing. It was a hard thing to do, but he was the only game in town.
Right.
He was the only person on at night. Joey Bishop tried to go up against him, didn't work out on it, right? But yeah, Johnny was really unique. He had a combination of a childish impishness. He had vulnerability. He was kind of cocky.
Yeah.
And he was a good comedian. He told you, he really wasn't a comedian. He was a broadcaster, but he turned himself into a pretty competent comedian with his monologues. Same thing with Conan O'Brien. Not a comedian. He was a writer, but he's done a pretty good job of getting out there and being able to tell jokes and do. Pat Sajak. Remember Pat?
Yeah.
Had a talk show. Yeah. Yeah, he did pretty good. It's hard to go from broadcaster to doing stand-up comedy. That's why most of the talk show hosts now came from comedy.
Well, you got writers, it helps too.
Just because you're stand-up comedy doesn't mean you know how to do broadcasting.
Right.
Broadcasting and acting and stand-up comedy are like three totally different things.
Well, speaking of acting, that was my next question for you. You took a break to kind of focus on your family for a little while, which is not more important than family, but you were in some movies like Gorp, Stooge Mania, The Story of Us, The Alternate, Boogie Nights, Unbelievable Harold. What do you remember most about your movie career?
Let's see. I think the biggest movie, I was in Airplane for 3 seconds. I was...
all-time classic.
For some reason, I didn't get a credit on that, but I was in the hospital with Ethel Merman. Movies are hard. I really prefer television because I'm kind of basically lazy.
Okay.
But movies they're hard. You got to get up early.
Yeah.
You got to go sit in a chair while someone puts cold makeup on you. You got to sit around a lot. Movies move so slowly. That's why they have trailers, so you can go take a nap or watch TV or do it, because it's big gaps of
downtime, right?
If you know how a movie's done, they have one camera and they get different angles. Right? Each time they change that angle of that camera, they got to relight it and blah 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 blah.
Do it again. Do it again.
It could take 45 minutes to 2 hours depending on what you're shooting.
Right.
And so you got to go sit down and you wait and you wait and you wait. A lot of waiting. A lot of waiting in movies. Okay. That's why they have stand-ins. People mistake stand-ins for stuntmen. It's not the same thing.
Right.
A stuntman is someone that does stunts for you. A stand-in is a person that theoretically is pretty much your height and kind of looks like you maybe, if they're like, because I've had stand-ins that didn't necessarily look like me, but they get someone that's similar to you, and that's what they do. They stand there while the people do the lighting and focus lighting on you, and so they're just a warm body that resembles you, so that the stars don't have to just stand there. So they get a person to be a stand-in, and so they stand. That's what they do. You're in your trailer and you got somebody standing in the light, and when they get everything all fixed up, then you come in, and then they put you, and they might make a little adjustments or something. But that's what those people do. There's people down there just to kind of stand there so they can focus lights on them.
Who knows? You want to be a movie star, you got to do a lot of standing. Who knows? A lot of bills to pay. But you're also a spokesperson for diabetes. You do a thing called the Diabetes Hero Squad. Tell us about that.
Well, that's for my writing partner Brad Slade. He and I came up with these characters because he's a type 1 diabetic and I'm type 2, and when we started thinking about this, and we watched all the educational material that is around, and it's mostly kind of boring, stupid stuff, and it's just boring. When you try to get pharmacies to have entertainment value, it doesn't usually work. So we came up with these characters, Captain Glucose and Meter Boy, and it's mostly these characters that inform people that, especially type 2 diabetics, who, at one point in their life, the doctor said, "Hey, you're diabetic," and they really don't know what that means. A lot of people think, oh, you eat too much sugar, and it's not really about that.
Right.
So it's an educational characters that we created that we put on videos on and stuff like that. And we're still looking to hopefully get some sort of a sponsor in the diabetes commercial world to because we'd like to do more videos and stuff, but it gets a little expensive just financing them on your own.
Getting the message out, yeah.
So that's what we do with that. We've been doing it for quite a while, but we'd like to get a big truck and travel around and have Captain Glucose and Meteor Boy do shows for kids and people and things like that. But that's the dream.
That's the dream, right? Okay.
We'll see.
All right. Speaking of the dreams, you're also involved with the Legends of Comedy, and I guess the most popular one I can think of is Robin, the Ultimate Robin Williams Tribute Experience. What can you tell us about that?
Well, about 20-something years ago, I was in Las Vegas, and I had this friend of mine that did Sam Kinison. And
my hero.
Been dead for about a year or two. I'm not quite sure. But I had this friend that did a great Sam Kinison impression. And so I said to him, let me see if I can get you a job in Legends in Concert, which was the original Legends type show where they tribute band, where they had Elvis and Cher and, Michael Jackson and all that. And it was very successful, but it was only singers and, music. So I called them up and I said, hey, I've got a friend that does Sam Kinison. Well, I think he'd be great in the show. And then we don't do comedy. Click, and hung up on me. And a light bulb went off over my head, and I thought, well, shoot, if they can do musicians, well, why can't I do comedians? And I went about my time for about a year looking for people who could impersonate famous comedians. And I got a guy that did Jay Leno. I had a woman that did Roseanne, Jack Benny. I had a guy that did Red Skelton, Dangerfields, Bob Hope. I had a whole slew of Phyllis Diller, Bill Cosby.
Really?
This whole stable of people that did really good. I mean, you swear to God, you're looking at them. And I did that for a while. And the George Burns guy I had, he was an old guy, and he eventually died. And the Jack Benny guy, the same thing with that. And then my Dangerfield guy, he got old too, and he died. And then,
so what was the response from people? Were they accepting of it?
People loved it. It was a great show.
Really?
The only problem with it was rather expensive because it had, anywhere from 3 to 4 to 5 people in it.
Right.
And so I had hired Roger Cabler, who's a fabulous impressionist, to do Robin in the show for me a couple times. And I had a guy did George Carlin, great George Carlin. And then when Robin died, about a year after, I said to him, why don't we celebrate Robin's life and his act and just do a show just with Robin? So out of that came Robin, the Ultimate Robin Williams Tribute Experience, which if you want to see about it, it's at robinexperience.com.
Okay.
And
was that from your time on Mork and Mindy? Is that why you wanted to do it, because of the time you spent with the actual Robin?
Well, I mean, I knew Robin. Yeah, I did. I think 4 Mork and Mindys. I knew Robin from the day he came to town.
That inspire you?
I worked with him a lot. I did improv with him. I did Mork and Mindy's. I knew him through the day he hit town.
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't great buddies or anything. I never went over to his house, but
right.
We had a certain professional respect for each other. And I knew him. I spent many hours in his trailer sitting with him, talking and stuff when we were doing Mork and Mindy. But I just and Roger does such a great. It's more than an impression. An impression is something you go, hey, I want to do an impression, and you do,
right.
Dangerfield or something. It's last 5 minutes. This is a 50-minute show, and then
did you give him any advice about
himself and does more impressions of different people that he does? But it's a great tribute show, and it's a really kind of a magic show, in that I'm thinking, I'm making you think you're seeing something you're not. It's also, tribute shows are for a reason. That's why they're successful.
Right.
It's like Elvis. People so loved Elvis. They loved his music. They loved his charisma. And he was quite a showman. And they don't want to let go. So consequently, you have all these Elvis impersonators that can reasonably recreate the experience of seeing an Elvis show. And it's a very viable way of entertainment. People love it, and it's the same thing with Robin. He was so loved, and a lot of people never got to see his stand-up show.
Yeah.
They only saw him on TV, doing talk shows or things like that, or in the movies. But there was a whole other aspect to him performing live in the improvisational way that he was, and the ultimate Robin Williams tribute experience is exactly that, a chance to...
Now, did you ever give him advice, hey, this is how the real Robin would do it? This is how the real Robin wouldn't do it like that. I mean, did you ever give him advice how to do it?
Yeah, he did. It's like you were going to see Robin in 1995.
So it's that close to it's like you said, it's like Elvis. It's the experience, you're experiencing them.
Right, it's a recreation of the excitement. We can't really do that, but here it is. And we travel all over. We do casinos and performing arts centers. This week we're in Memphis, Tennessee at the Bartlett Performing Arts Center. We do casinos, private parties, corporate events.
I'm in Massachusetts. I remember not too long ago he was in Massachusetts. I came so close to seeing it, and something popped up. I didn't get to go.
Yeah, we work a lot back east. There's so many little theaters and towns, little towns I can't pronounce that have a nice little 300, 400-seat theater, and we do. He's going to be in Bedford, Massachusetts, actually, on February 22nd.
Really?
Of 2020.
Well, I might have to check that out.
And
are you going to be with him? Because I saw you were opening for him. Are you going to be on any of his shows?
No, I'm not going to be opening for him. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
Okay.
But it's if you get a chance to see it, he's all over the Eastern Seaboard there. We're from New York to Vermont.
Okay.
New Hampshire, all the way up in there. It's really a quite magical show. I'm very proud to produce it.
All right. Well, I look forward to seeing it. Let's see. It says here that you played Coach Graham Lubbock on Growing Pains in 1985, on Just the Ten of Us in 1987. Then years later, you brought it back in Clueless in 1996. So how did the idea of bringing that character back come about?
Well, it really wasn't. It wasn't. One of the producers that worked on Growing Pains turned into one of the producers that did Clueless on the... I think at the time it was called Paramount Network.
Okay.
And so he decided he wanted to have a coach at the high school. That guy's name was Coach Bullock.
Okay.
If you actually look at it,
that's how it came about. Okay.
It's still me.
Still you. All right, but
yeah, it's still me. It's just a different name.
Right. So there was one other fact I had to ask you about here. It said you once rode a carousel for 360 hours straight. Is that true or false?
I've never heard of that. Absolutely
all
not.
Right. So that's a false rumor about you. We just put an end to that one.
Where did you hear that?
That was on Wikipedia.
Oh, I know what that's from.
Okay, what is it?
I know what that is. It's the idiots that live around here in the town I'm from.
Oh.
In Lakeway here.
Well, they're messing with you on Wikipedia.
Well, somebody went on there and put that on it. The thing, I tell you what that came from. There's some idiot that did that. It's a boring little town with mostly boring little people that don't know how to put on a show. And I recommended at one point in a city hall thing that they build a carousel and put it in the park here, because there's a town called Mansfield, Ohio, and they have a carousel, and people come from miles around to this carousel, and it's like in the middle of a little park, and they ride the carousel. And so I had suggested that once here in Lakeway, that they, to do something interesting rather than build another bank building or something, that they spend some money on a nice carousel with a calliope and bring back a little America. So that's somebody from around here that is an idiot that thinks that
starting rumors
that they would do that. I'm surprised they didn't put something worse.
It could have been worse. There you go. So riding a carousel's not too bad, I guess.
Trying to make fun of the idea when they really don't know it would actually be a fabulous thing.
All right, we're getting towards the end.
There's all these people around that want to think...
they want to be a comedian, right? Everybody wants to be a comedian, right?
Yeah.
All right, getting toward the end of the podcast here, Funny Like a Clown podcast. We do have a big listener base in New England, and most of them are young comics, and they look up to guys like you who are veterans of the scene. And if you had some advice for the young comics coming up, I mean, you've experienced a lot of success what would your advice be to the young comics?
Well, I think it's important to know your history. I think if you're going to be a comedian, you should know the history of American comedy and know who came before you and, who did this and who did that. I find a lot of the younger comedians have no idea who, Johnny Carson is.
Right.
Now, I'm 60, I'm going to be 67. And so, a lot of my people that I remember from the 50s and 60s, but you know what? I still know who Fibber McGee and Molly is, and that was back in the 20s. I know Jack Benny. I know, a lot of the silent movie stars. And I think you should know, if you're going to be a brain surgeon, I think you'd want to know who some of the great brain surgeons in history were. Or if you wanted to be an ice skater, you should know, who Peggy Fleming is and how that happened. And if you're going to really be a comedian, so that you know what has already been done and who's funny, and just know your history. I think people need to know their history of comedy. Lenny Bruce, who made it so you can say these words up on stage.
Went to jail for it.
It's illegal. I got news for you.
Right.
But guys like that, and Carlin and Godfrey Cambridge, and there were a lot of comedians in the 50s and 60s that a lot of the younger comedians just aren't familiar with.
Right.
And you really owe it to yourself, if you're serious about being a comedian, to know the history of comedy and who did it before you.
Educate yourself. Education is the key.
Where you are now.
Right. Well, Bill, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. Is there any subject you'd like to hit that we haven't before we go, or?
No, I just want to remind everybody about my podcast, Kirchenbauer Half an Hour to the Second Power, and try to go see the Robin Williams show. Robin, the Ultimate Robin. If you go to robinexperience.com, you can see all the places where the show is going to be.
All right, I'm looking forward to seeing that myself. I want to thank you so much for bringing me back to my childhood and being on my podcast. Thank you so much, Bill.
Well, thank you, and take care, and goodbye.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
All right, comedian Bill Kirchenbauer right there, bringing us back to our childhood, just the 10 of us. I mean, legendary comedian, and few taste the success in the business that he's tasted. So listen to his advice, great advice right there. Educate yourself. Anything in life, education is power, and that's why kids pay so much to go to college, to get an education. Well, if you're going to be a comedian, educate yourself about the business. That's great advice. I love it. This is Funny the Clown Podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Wirth, bringing you the stars here today for the big episode 50. I look forward to 50 more episodes. Keep tuning in. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors. Until next time, keep laughing, because laughter is the best medicine. Good night.